Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah's Stories. Have you ever wondered how a single moment of honesty could change the course of an entire lifetime? Today, I invite you to join me on a journey filled with love, regret, and second chances. A story that reminds us it's never too late to find our way home. A gentle twilight bathed the garden outside the grand ballroom, casting a warm golden hue over neatly trimmed lawns and lush green hedges. White roses swayed lightly in the breeze, their sweet fragrance drifting subtly through the crisp air. In the distance, the soft melodies of a grand piano blended with the cheerful chatter of guests, weaving a picture of effortless elegance. Amidst it all, Ethan Montgomery stood silently by the vast glass window, separated from the dazzling crowd behind him. His tailored black tuxedo framed his strong figure perfectly, yet his eyes held a deep, unspoken melancholy. Today was his wedding day, a media spectacle, a moment that should have filled him with unmatched joy. And yet, a heavy cloud of doubt weighed upon his heart. Across the room, his stunning fiancée smiled radiantly, her diamond bracelet catching the light with every graceful movement. She was everything society adored, young, alluring, ambitious. But Ethan couldn't help but wonder, did she love him, or merely the empire he represented? A cold gust slipped through the slight opening in the door, stirring the doubts that had long lingered in the back of his mind. Turning sharply, Ethan strode through the grand corridors, leaving behind the music and laughter that grew fainter with each step. Moments later, he was behind the wheel of his sleek black sports car, racing into the descending evening, carrying with him questions too heavy to ignore. The twilight wrapped itself around the coastal road, where puddles of rain still gleamed faintly under the fading lights. Ethan Montgomery sped down the deserted highway in his sleek black sports car, letting doubt and unease gnaw at him with every passing mile. Behind him, the glittering celebration had faded into a distant, meaningless shadow. A sharp curve loomed ahead, a fierce gust of wind ripped through, sending broken branches across the asphalt. A small creature darted out. Reflexively, Ethan jerked the wheel. The tires screeched against the wet surface, the car spinning wildly before crashing violently into the steel guardrail with a sickening crunch of metal. Darkness swallowed him whole. Ethan was rushed into St. Mary's Hospital that very night. He was completely unconscious, his face bloodied, his body limp as though the world itself had crushed him. Doctors and nurses fought desperately against the ticking clock, every heartbeat a battle. When Isabelle Hart, head nurse of the ICU, approached, her eyes flicked over the patient file briefly. But the moment she looked up and saw his face, Isabelle froze. Her breath caught painfully in her chest. Ethan Montgomery, the man she had once loved beyond reason, the man she had been forced to leave behind to protect everything she held dear. The old pain surged back, sharp and merciless. But Isabelle quickly composed herself. Clutching the vital signs monitor tightly, she forced her heart to still and silently began her work. No one would see the storm raging inside her. She tended to Ethan with meticulous care, adjusting drips, checking machines, monitoring every fragile sign. She performed every task with calm professionalism, as if he were just another patient. But inside, each touch, each faint beat of his heart shook her to the core. She reminded herself firmly he must never know, never. The following days passed slowly, as if even time itself hesitated on the fragile boundary between life and death. The ICU room where Ethan Montgomery lay was often bathed in dim light, filled only with the steady hum of machines. Isabelle Hart visited him every day. She checked his vitals, changed his dressings, adjusted the ventilator, and when her tasks were quietly completed, she would settle into the chair beside his bed, a small, worn book resting in her hands. She read to him, her voice gentle as a whisper in the still air, stories of hope, of resilience, of love that endured beyond time. She spoke of bright summer days and half-formed dreams, as if he could still hear every word. What Isabelle didn't know was that Ethan had awakened. At first, his awareness was blurred, floating between dreams and reality. But gradually he recognized the familiar voice, the tender breath that had once been his entire world. Ethan remained still, his muscles heavy and unresponsive. Every breath was a battle, but he gave no sign of his awakening. He simply listened. Each story Isabelle read, each memory she unknowingly revealed, cut into Ethan like a blade and soothed him like a balm. He longed to open his eyes to call out to her, but something held him back. A faint instinct whispered that there were truths Isabelle had yet to reveal. And so he waited. He listened. He needed to understand everything before facing the past they had both left behind. Night settled over St. Mary's Hospital, sweeping through the long corridors with a biting stillness. The pale neon lights cast ghostly reflections on the empty beds, and in ICU room 207, a single lamp flickered softly in the gloom. Isabelle Hart sat there, as she did every night, beside Ethan Montgomery's bed. An open book rested in her lap, but tonight she no longer had the strength to read. She sat in silence, her eyes tracing the peaceful facade of Ethan's face, a face she had memorized in countless dreams. Memories surged, threatening to drown her in a flood of regret. Then, unable to hold back any longer, Isabelle lowered her head and spoke, her voice trembling. "You know, Ethan, there's something I've kept from you all these endless years." She gripped his cold hand tighter, her tears falling freely. "We have a daughter, Ethan. I was pregnant just before everything fell apart. But your mother, she forced me to leave. She threatened to destroy my family if I didn't disappear from your life." Her voice cracked, shattering the professional calm she always wore. "I had no choice. I just wanted to protect my family and our child." Isabelle pressed her hand against Ethan's chest, feeling the faint, stubborn beat beneath her palm. She whispered through her sobs, "She grew up never knowing her father, and I've spent every day wondering if you would ever forgive me if you knew." Beneath his pale skin, Ethan's lips moved slightly, as if wanting to call out to her, to say something, but he remained still, his eyes closed, his heart aching beyond words. He had heard it all. A tide of overwhelming emotions crashed through him, sorrow, love, regret, and a fierce, undying hope. In that moment, though he could not yet move, Ethan Montgomery knew one thing for certain. Their love had never truly died. It had only been buried under years of pain and misunderstanding. He would wait until he could open his eyes, look into hers, and promise her he was here now and he would never let her go again. The night outside the ICU window seemed frozen in place. Inside, only the steady beeping of the monitor broke the stillness, casting a soft, dim glow over Ethan Montgomery's seemingly unconscious face. Isabelle had stepped away briefly to handle medical reports, and in that moment, the door to the ICU creaked open, so quietly that none of the staff noticed. Amelia Davenport, Ethan's stunning fiancée, slipped inside, accompanied by a man Ethan recognized as one of his business associates. She perched beside the bed, her calculating eyes scanning Ethan's motionless form. "Just sign everything," the man whispered. "He's not waking up. The entire fortune will be yours." Amelia let out a soft, chilling laugh. "I never loved him. I only loved what he could give me." Ethan heard every word. Each syllable struck him like a blade, sinking deeper into his chest. Fury ignited within him, burning hotter with every breath. No longer willing to endure it, Ethan slowly opened his eyes. Amelia froze, her hand hovering midair over the papers. Ethan lifted his heavy arm, locking eyes with her, his gaze as cold and sharp as steel. A deadly silence filled the room. "How unfortunate." His voice was hoarse, but it sliced through the air like a dagger. "That I heard every word you said." Amelia stammered, her face draining of all color. The man beside her turned pale and hastily backed toward the door. Bracing himself, Ethan pushed up from the bed, every muscle screaming in protest, but his eyes burned with fierce clarity. "Get out, now." He didn't need to shout. The low growl of his voice shook the very air with authority. Amelia stumbled to her feet and bolted from the room. little more than a shadow fleeing disgrace. Only Ethan remained, breathing heavily, the room pulsing with a mix of raw pain and seething rage. He had wasted enough time on a counterfeit love. He would waste no more, not when there were real battles still worth fighting. By the next morning, the news spread through the hospital corridors like wildfire. Ethan Montgomery was awake, and he had called for an official meeting right there at the hospital. In a makeshift conference room under the cold glare of fluorescent lights, Ethan sat upright in a wheelchair. His body was still weak, but his presence was unmistakable, cold, resolute, and utterly in control. Across from him sat Amelia Davenport, her face pale, clinging desperately to the last shreds of dignity. Beside her, a private attorney shuffled nervously with a thick stack of documents. There were no smiles, no pleasantries. Ethan spoke first. "The ceremony, the marriage, is over." Amelia trembled, stammering. "Ethan, you don't understand. Enough." His voice was as sharp as a blade. "I've heard all I need." From his jacket, Ethan pulled out a prepared document, a formal annulment agreement. He placed it firmly on the table and nodded to his lawyer. "Proceed." Amelia froze. All the dreams of wealth and fame she had so carefully crafted crumbled in an instant. With no more lies to cling to, no more masks to wear, she picked up the pen with a trembling hand and signed. Ethan watched, his eyes devoid of softness. Mercy was a luxury he reserved for the worthy, not for betrayers. When the signing was complete, Ethan steered his wheelchair toward the door himself. His figure receded down the hallway, leaving behind a chapter steeped in deception and moving toward a future where only truth would have a place. He had already lost too much. He would never again let anyone else dictate the course of his life. That afternoon, as the last golden rays of sunlight brushed the hospital steps, Ethan Montgomery requested a private meeting with Isabelle Hart. She entered the small room where Ethan sat by the window, his wheelchair neatly tucked beside him. The soft, fading light etched every line of his strong but weary face. Isabelle froze at the threshold, her hands twisting nervously. Her heart pounded against her ribs, dread rising in waves. He was awake. How much did he know? Did he hate her? Ethan lifted his gaze, locking eyes with her, deep, steady, unflinching. There was no anger, no accusation. A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the faint whisper of wind through the open window. At last, Ethan spoke, his voice rough but warm. "I heard everything, Isabelle." Isabelle exhaled shakily, her eyes glistening with tears. She dropped her gaze, her voice trembling. I'm sorry, I didn't know what else to do. I was so scared. I just wanted to protect her." Ethan didn't interrupt. He let her speak, let her spill out all the anguish she had carried for so many years. When she finally fell silent, Ethan nodded gently. "I understand." He paused, weighing his next words carefully. "I don't blame you. Not for a single moment." Isabelle looked up, wide-eyed, unable to believe what she was hearing. Ethan met her gaze, his voice firm. "The only thing I want now is to meet our daughter." Tears streamed freely down Isabelle's cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak. And in that fragile, broken moment, a bridge of hope began to rise between two souls who had once lost everything. That weekend, in the small garden behind St. Mary's Hospital, was bathed in the golden glow of sunset. Bright chrysanthemums bloomed along the path, and the soft scent of fresh grass filled the air. Ethan Montgomery sat silently in his wheelchair, his hands gripping the armrests, heart pounding like a young boy about to face the most important moment of his life. Beside him, Isabelle squeezed his hand gently, whispering, "Are you ready?" Ethan nodded, his throat painfully dry. From across the garden, Emily approached, her deep brown eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Beside her, a little girl, no more than 5 years old, clutched at her mother's dress, her wide, curious eyes scanning the scene. When they were only a few steps away, Emily knelt down to her daughter's level and whispered, "Emma, remember what I told you?" "This man, he's your grandfather." Emma blinked, uncertain. Then she turned her gaze to Ethan, those clear, innocent eyes striking straight into his battered heart. A silence stretched taut between them. Ethan struggled to speak, his voice raw. I'm sorry for being late." Emily reached out, grasping his trembling hand. "You don't need to apologize. All my life, I've only ever wished for this moment to finally meet you." Her voice cracked, and tears spilled freely. Emma, puzzled by the grown-up's tears, hesitated for a heartbeat. Then, gathering all her tiny courage, she stepped forward, placed her small hand on Ethan's knee, and whispered, "Grandpa, please don't cry. We just found each other." That simple, innocent call shattered every wall around Ethan's heart. A choked laugh escaped him, and tears flowed down his cheeks without shame. He leaned forward and pulled little Emma into a trembling embrace, whispering hoarsely, "Grandpa's here now, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere." Emily knelt beside them, wrapping her arms around both her daughter and her father. Isabelle stood a little apart, her eyes glistening with silent joy. And in that golden, trembling moment, Ethan knew. Every loss, every mistake had been forgiven, because in the end, love had endured. The day Ethan Montgomery was discharged from St. Mary's Hospital, the sky stretched endlessly above, as clear and bright as a new beginning. Isabelle stood quietly by the gates, watching his figure disappear into the crowd, a swirl of emotion stirring within her. What she didn't know was that from that moment, Ethan had made a silent vow. He would not let fate steal her away from him again. After his discharge, Ethan began finding ways to reconnect with Isabelle. No longer just chance encounters in sterile hallways, but invitations to quiet coffee dates at cozy cafes, afternoon walks in sunlit parks, and evenings spent simply sitting together beneath a sky strewn with stars. He didn't rush her, nor did he press. He simply stayed, listening, sharing, smiling whenever her guarded eyes softened, even if just for a fleeting moment. And Isabelle, despite her careful defenses, couldn't deny it. Ethan Montgomery, the man she had once loved so fiercely, was still there, and the love in his gaze was even stronger, more enduring than before. Little by little, the walls she had built around her heart began to crumble. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe. Maybe this time, they wouldn't lose each other again. A new chapter had begun for Ethan Montgomery, Isabelle Hart, and Emily. They didn't rush. Each day was built on quiet, precious moments, warm family dinners, silent evening walks, embraces that spoke of forgiveness and love. Each day, they learned to understand each other a little more, making up for all the lost years. One peaceful afternoon, as the garden glowed under the soft golden light of sunset, Ethan brought Isabelle back to the place where their paths had reunited. No flashy diamond, no grand kneeling gesture, just Ethan holding her hand, his eyes shining with the same light as when he first fell in love. "I once believed I had everything," he whispered, voice shaking slightly. "But it wasn't the wealth or the power. It was you. Isabelle, would you give me the honor of building a new life together, stronger than anything we ever dreamed?" Isabelle laughed through her tears, whispering back, "I've always been here, just waiting for you to reach out." Her simple yes filled every broken corner of their hearts. Their wedding was modest but radiant, attended only by family, close friends, and pure, unfiltered joy. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Ethan, Isabelle, and Emily sat on the porch, hand in hand, sipping warm tea and smiling quietly at the life they had found. No more distant dreams, only the present, whole, beautiful, and finally at peace. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Noah's Stories. Your support keeps these beautiful journeys alive. Until next time, keep living in love, forgiveness, and second chances. See you soon, lovely soul.